Ah, fantastic. Here we go.
All right, let us begin. Welcome to Zonta Says Now Intercontinental Think Tank. Our topic today, women's health in the context of climate change. I'm Julie Trone, and I will be your host today. Before we begin, as you see on the screen, I'd like to cover some housekeeping. Use the chat line for making comments and asking questions. Please use welcoming and inclusive language, avoid judgment, criticism, and hateful comments. Ask short, succinct questions. Answer questions or comment respectfully. We will use breakout rooms during this presentation, and we really welcome your contributions. Our African European journey today is technically led by me in Colorado, USA. I'll be working behind the scenes, monitoring the chat line and setting up the breakout rooms. Our moderators are from 4 continents. From Africa, we have Joan Kabayambi from Kampala in Uganda. From Europe, we have Pia Hultgren from Lidingö in Sweden. Karen Lang is from Berlin in Germany. In Asia, we have Dilruba Ahmed from Chittagong in Bangladesh and Erica Lavia from Bombay in India. And from the USA, we have Bobby Cardillo from Fairfax County in Virginia. Over to you, Pia.
Thank you, Julie. This is our journey for today. To get us all on the same page, we will give an overview of Zonta Says Now and our issues, as well as today's focus on women's health in the context of climate change. We will then welcome and introduce our keynote speakers from Germany, Professor Dr. Eva Kandlehart, and from Kenya, Melvine Otieno. We will learn from their insights and experiences on today's topic, and then have an intercontinental discussion, first in our breakout rooms and then in the plenary. We will then look at solutions recommended by diverse thought leaders from around the world. We will discuss these in our second breakout session and in the plenary with our panelists. Finally, we will summarize and close the session. So, founded in 1919, Zonta International is an international human rights organization committed to building a better world for women and girls. In short, our 26,000 members in 64 countries say yes to gender equity, no to violence against women, and now to climate justice. Why do we say now to gender equal climate justice? Over to you, Bobby.
Thank you, Pia. We use this train to show why. This train was built during the Industrial Revolution, a time when humans started to put more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, where they're accumulating, forming a blanket around the planet, and causing global heating and associated extreme weather events. Droughts, fires, floods, and storms trigger social disruption, causing millions of people to lose their livelihoods and homes. The social disruption magnifies any existing inequality, including gender inequality. Zonta Says Now stops the train by advocating for governments to meet their obligations under the Paris Agreement and closing the gender gaps in education, health, economic opportunity, and safety. Zonta Says Now seeks climate justice for women and girls. We want women to be able to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the impacts of climate change on the same basis as men. We do this by taking gender equal climate action locally, nationally, and internationally. Climate change impacts women and girls of all ages in all countries. These are the women and girls who inspired Zonta to act, and their stories also illustrate how climate change is affecting women's health. Because of the drought, 9-year-old Deborah in Sudan has to walk far to feed the goats and can't go to school. If the drought threatens her family's livelihood, she could be married off, like Ayan. in Mozambique and face early pregnancy and its complications. Maria in Australia may not survive the next heat wave. And if floods destroy Relia's livelihood, she and her children will not only face food insecurity and hunger-related diseases, but waterborne diseases such as cholera will spread. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Bobby. We are here today to explore why and how climate change in particular affects the health of women and children, and what can be done. We're doing this by building a bridge between Africa and Europe. We are delighted to welcome two renowned global health experts who are already working together across continents. A warm welcome to Professor Dr. Eva Kandlehart from the Department of Global Health at the University of Halle in Germany, and Melvine Otieno, founder of the Planetary Health Eastern Africa Hub from Kenya. We are so honored and excited to have you here. Before we introduce you and listen to you, let's take a look at some of the key factors. It is saddening to know that millions of people are already dying every year due to industrial CO2 emissions and their effects. Women, girls, and children in general are more likely to be severely affected. Even unborn babies suffer from CO2 emissions and pollution, as Ugandan climate activist Vanessa Nakate points out. Let us briefly recall some of the underlying key factors that we discussed at this year's CSW 68 in March. The economic inequality between women and men remains one of the greatest threats to women's health. According to the World Bank, around 690 million people will live in extreme poverty in 2023. With the situation of people in sub-Saharan Africa particularly problematic. Around 70% of all people living in poverty, 1.3 billion worldwide, are women and girls. In light of today's focus on women's health, let us remember that if we continue with business as usual, climate change will push up to 158 million more women and girls into poverty and 236 million more women into hunger. Climate change affects women's health and well-being. As shown by a multi-study, climate change has already led to a dramatic increase in deaths and injuries from extreme weather events, greater food insecurity, and an increase in infectious diseases. These include waterborne diseases such as cholera and vector-borne diseases spread by insects, for instance, mosquitoes, such as malaria. There has also been an increase in mental illness and a significant deterioration in reproductive and maternal health. Extreme heat has been linked to premature births, miscarriages, excess female mortality, and congenital diseases, even in developed countries. We will hear more about this today. Lack of water for washing or contaminated water for drinking adds to the burden of disease. Women and girls are often the last in the household to eat, and mothers often give up food so that their children can eat. During a climate disaster, health services are disrupted. Treatment may be inaccessible, and there may be more unplanned pregnancies. And there is an increase in gender-based violence during and in the aftermath of extreme weather events. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Julie. Let us now take a scientific deep dive and listen to some extraordinary experts on global and planetary health. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Professor Dr. Eva Kandlehart. Professor Kandlehart is a gynecologist, and researcher. She heads the Global and Planetary Health Department of the renowned University Medicine Halle. And in March, together with her colleagues, she published a joint position paper calling the German government for measures to be taken in response to the effects of climate change on women's health. Her research focuses on global inequalities in cancer care in the context of different healthcare systems. She works with colleagues in Africa on cancer epidemiology in sub-Saharan Africa and has been collaborating with the African Cancer Registry Network, AFCRN, since 2011. Eva Kandlehart lives in the beautiful birth town of famous 17th century German composer Georg Friedrich Händel. The ancient town of Halle sure is worth a visit. If Eva Kandlehart does not have to work, she loves to explore Germany on bike. Welcome, Professor Kandlehart. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you for the invitation and for the very kind introduction. My main focus is on global health, but I'm also a practicing clinical gynecologist in our university hospital. So I can say this is now the German perspective, which I have the pleasure of presenting. And definitely, we also have to talk about climate disaster and women's health. I want to start with some rather more good news. If we look at health in general, also from a global perspective, it has definitely made a big change. Here we can see life expectancy around 1800. 200 years ago, the majority of countries had a mean life expectancy around 30 years only. You can see all countries, the bubbles here, depending on size of the bubble is the population size, and the continents are color-coded. Europe is yellow and Africa is bluish. Also in 1800, there wasn't a big economy. If you look at the gross domestic product, nearly for all countries, it was pretty low. Now, next slide, please. There is a big improvement. We can see here in 2019, all countries on this globe have a life expectancy above 60 years of age, or at least near to 60 years of age. Definitely, this is true for countries with very high GDP, a very high gross domestic product, but also for the countries who are having lower resources in this respect. Now, how has this happened? Next slide, please. We can say that efforts within the last 20 years have also contributed quite a lot. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the Millennium Goals, which were goals that nearly all heads of state agreed upon in 2000. It was all about joining efforts, joining resources over those 15 years to improve 8 goals. As a gynecologist, of course, we were very happy that so many of these goals are about women's health. Reducing maternal mortality, reducing child mortality, gender equity, as well as certain disease like HIV also linked to gynecology. And if we look at those goals, which had actual targets for the first time, where the global community agreed, we want these targets. Next slide, please. The majority of them were indeed achieved. The number of people living in absolute poverty was halved. The literacy rate was greatly improved, and especially also child mortality rates dropped significantly. This is something I would say we can really be proud of. These are achievements. Despite, of course, I have to say, still every day we are working on these health aspects which still need improvement. My speaker has just mentioned there are still huge numbers of women and girls who have not access to these achievements. Next slide, please. But the question is, what about our daughters? What about the next generation? How is this good living for all going to continue? How can we make it sustainable? And one of the big troubles is indeed the issue of the climate disaster. You're all very aware of those different scenarios, the different increase in heat we will have on our globe. Irrespective if we are more like middle or older age, I'm sure all of us have noticed already, and in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll notice even more that definitely temperature would change. Next slide, please. Climate crisis has impact on women's health. I don't want to go into so much detail. I want to talk about heat waves and air pollutions, and this is now from the German perspective. Next slide, please. Climate crisis specifically affects women concerning these issues like heat or air pollution, in addition to other troubles coming up. Women by themselves are vulnerable and have especially vulnerable phases in life. Pregnancy, childbirth, the neonatal period, as well as reproductive capacity, just physiologically make them prone to the effects of these external changes. Next slide, please. Here you can see the number of hot days per year per district, and I guess probably all of the countries you live in have a similar pattern, and effectively Germany is not spared out. The number of hot days per year has tripled since the 50s. And I can say, working in the emergency department in August, I can definitely see that there is a change compared to 20 years ago. Next slide, please. Physiologic effects of heat. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I think it's pretty clear that heat causes sweating, causes fluid loss, and may well cause a degree of dehydration. This causes additional effects of heart and of cardiac volume, which leads to increased heart rate, decreased blood pressure, as well as peripheral vasodilatations. And the body has to really do measures to keep up the circulation properly. And in pregnancy, already there's more blood volume, higher stroke volume, and already more adaptation needed. And this can lead to acute complications as well as long-term effects. Next slide, please. This is a paper, a publication which has really woken up also the German community, and that's why we have written, one of the reasons why we have written our position paper. Next slide, please. In summary, we can say that both extreme heat and longer periods of heat increases the relative risk of premature birth. So to say that they observed a large number of single pregnancies. This is the Hamburg University Hospital, and looked at details of weather events. Next slide, please. And we found that there is a significant increased risk of premature birth, and this is all across each different gestational ages. For example, you can see my arrow. If the daily maximum temperatures as well as perceived temperature, this also includes humidity, increases, and then you can find that there is almost a double risk of having children born prematurely. And these are numbers. Here you can say see something like 14 or 24. This sounds small, but if you add that up over the whole of Germany, we will, through these already existing weather events, we have around 300 to 600 more preterm babies. And if you have seen how much effort we need to actually care for those babies, this is already a huge impact. Next slide, please. This showcases the same in another publication. Next slide, please. Air pollution is the second point. We know that pollutants are carried to the fetus. The fetus has a very high metabolic rate, still developing, and actually receives almost twice as much per body weight as adults do. There are adverse effects on maternal and postpartum situation, as well as, again, preterm birth weight. Next slide, please. And I just want to show you a very recent result of a master's student. He's actually also a PhD student of mine, and he looked at a population-based nationwide longitudinal study from Sweden. So this is to our Swedish colleagues. Next slide, please. He looked at those fine particulate matters of 2.5 and 10, this as well as nitrogen dioxide and ozone, and looked at growth parameters during pregnancy from the national birth register. This is, of course, an excellent opportunity. Next slide, please. And he definitely found there is kind of a dose-response relationship. For example, if you look at the graph on the upper left, we can see that this fine particulate matter 2.5 has a negative effect on the abdominal circumference. You can see if the fine particulate matter is higher, which goes to the right, then the abdominal circumference, which is on the y-axis, that is actually dropping. The same is about the birth weight. Higher particulate matter is very much associated with a lower birth weight in kind of a dose response effect. Next, please. I think this is an encouragement in a way. We do have good lives for many people already. I think this still really needs improvement, especially on women's health side. But at the same time, we also definitely have to look ahead into the future in a global way to making these good lives sustainable. And there's a greeting from our German Ethiopian collaboration, where we are working on women's cancers for a long time, as well as trying to now making a case for political leaders. Thank you. Next slide, please. So trying to make healthy women's lives for all in a sustainable way. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Kandlehart, for your, on the one hand, very encouraging and on the other hand, very alarming lecture. I'm sure we'll have plenty of food for thought now, and I hand it over with pleasure to Pia. Pia, you are muted.
So thank you. So now we have our great pleasure to introduce you to Melvine Otieno. Melvine lives in Eldoret in Western Kenya, the country's 5th largest city with a population of around 476,000 people. Melvine is an environmental health scientist and founder of the Planetary Health Eastern African Hub. She also is a Planetary Health Alliance Next Generation Fellow, and she's an associate team member of the Women Leaders for Planet Health, where she advocates for gender equality, for sound environmental and public health solutions. Melvine works as a lecturer at the University of Eldoret School of Environmental Sciences and Natural Resource Management, Department of Environmental Sciences. She is passionate about inspiring and activating and convening the next generation of planetary health campus ambassadors from around the world, as well as facilitating local international collaborations through her leadership in growing the Planetary Health Eastern African Hub. Melvine holds a bachelor degree in environmental biology and health and master's degree in environmental health from the University of Eldoret. Welcome, Melvine Otieno. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Pia, for that amazing introduction. And I would just like to share with you our perspective from the African side on the climate change and women's health. I would just like to say that Africa is really disproportionately the most vulnerable region in the world affected by climate change. And this is also seen due to the lack of adequate mitigation and adaptation measures And in these settings, we find out that the poor are disproportionately affected by these climatic effects. And like most other humanitarian and also the development challenges, this climate crisis perpetuates and also magnifies structural inequalities, such as those between women and men. And across the African continent, you find out that women bear an equal burden when it comes to climate impacts. And you find out that many women in this region really rely on climate-sensitive livelihoods, such as small-scale farming and also manual labor in most cases. So you find out that they're really exposed to extreme weather patterns like droughts and flooding, and in the process, it has been damaging the crops and also kills the livestock, which they depend from, you know. So despite also these realities, on the good side is that Africa also contributes to global initiatives and also commitments to the climate action. And we've seen in this space also, we see that there has been crucial need to prioritize planetary health concepts. So through the Planetary Health Alliance organization that I've worked closely with since 2019, they have created a number of initiatives under the regional hubs, one of them being the Eastern Africa Hub from Africa, and also we have the West Africa Hub. So for the Eastern Africa Hub, our mission is to advance, advocate, and also create awareness in the field of planetary health in the region, and also through education, empowerment, and research. And we see there is a shift in acquired knowledge to transformative action because there is a gap in knowledge from this end. And you find out that we are trying to enhance long-lasting solution by involving or engaging diverse groups of educators, students from diverse disciplines, policymakers, also researchers, artists, journalists, local communities. We've really tried as much as possible to work with also the indigenous communities. So we see together we'll achieve the great transition, a just transformational world to optimize the health and well-being of people and the planet. So our top priority has been to engage these communities through working closely, especially with the ones from the grassroots, because there's a number of local NGOs really trying as much as possible to prioritize women's health and child's health as well. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, I will really touch base on the importance of gender dynamics. We see that climatic conditions also, especially under the climate change, have really influenced the health of the people, animals, and environment. And this is also seen due to the many environmental and contextual factors that have been mentioned. And you find out that considering the gender dynamics, it is really essential in planetary health to recognize and also address these distinct roles, especially touching base among the vulnerabilities and also the impacts of both men and women, and also contributing to this effective and equitable strategies for sustainable and resilient ecosystems. So we see that these gender disparities in environmental impacts and vulnerabilities really often result from unequal access to resources, also limited participation in decision and also decision-making process, and also distinct social societal roles, leading to really differential exposure, adaptation challenges, and also consequences for both men and women in the face of environmental challenges. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the determinants of health conceptualization, we see that health really goes beyond individual factors. And from that picture, you can see the larger or more restrictive the outer rings, the greater the negative influence on health. And you find out that the individuals then has only limited influence on his or her individual health characteristics, and the state or the region in which we live can play a major role in enabling us to prioritize our health. And you find out that the social networks can also minimize, positively influence also the many conceptual factors that can have a negative impact on health. And you find out that this has really resulted to also, when you look into the sustainable food production and the care of the ecosystem, and also the possibilities of independent education and also a fair workplace, you find out affordable housing and adequate housing, protection of also these living conditions can have a positive influence. So all these influence our environment where we live in, and that's why I would like to share more insight about the African continent. Next slide, please. just to mention, these are just some of the important context factors on health. You find out that a number of them, the geographical and natural climates, and we find out that there is also political liberation, social economic background, family and community network, and also lifestyle. And we see that these factors have a greater or lesser influence on a person's health. And furthermore, these factors also influence the sexes differently. And there are many countries in which gender equality is not taken into account politically, especially, for example, when you look at gender, the SDG number 5, where we need to achieve gender equality and empower women and girls, you find out that there is no, in the UN country that has been able to achieve this SDG. Next slide, please. So I would like just to share an example from the flooding situation that has happened in Kenya even recently, but this is just a case study from the Lake Victoria Basin. We see that there are so much concerns about the impacts of flooding on women and children that are unlikely to be addressed. So the Lake Victoria Basin harbors around 5 Eastern African countries. In a number of it is inhabited by around 40,000 as in 40 million people across this region. So you find out that majority of people who depend on fish for selling are women. They are the ones who go there to buy the fish and sell it, but at the same time, they're really faced with this situation of climate change that comes with the mental health distress afterwards when they have lost their livelihoods, they have lost their homes. Like you can see in that first picture, I just took it when I was doing my research studies for my master's back then. And it was so devastating looking how the women and children are really in a vulnerable situation. And you find out that in most cases in our country, women are not involved in decision-making forums where their priorities could be established. Hence, interests of women are often poorly represented. And you find out that poverty is also a major driving factor behind these social burdens that place women. And you find that despite having the challenges of flooding situation like this, you find that they still have to go to have a productive work, like they still have to go and sell the fish in order to support their community, you know. And there is also the urgent need also now to involve these women in a disaster reduction programs, as flooding is really a gender sensitive issue. And you find out that these women also are really faced with a lot of health implications. And when I was just talking to a number of them, they say that they have to exchange their bodies so that they can get fish, because the men are the ones who are doing the fish farming themselves. So they have been able to get other diseases like HIV and AIDS, which is really another burden in this community. Next slide, please. Talking of now the health impacts of heat on women, this is just a project idea that we wanted to do for my PhD studies in Martin Luther. And it's just a honor that I'm here presenting this work together with my PhD supervisor, Dr. Kandlehart. And talking about the heat, the current annual global burden of heat-related deaths is approximately around 500,000, with avoidable deaths due to heat expected to increase in the coming decades due to climate change. So you find out that this is a refugee setting in northeastern Kenya, and it's called the Doughnut. So these populations typically have significant and also complex health needs, particularly related to access to safe water and also hygiene and sanitation. At the same time, in the recent studies concerning the heat and also other forms of environmental exposure in these refugee camps, you find out that they have relied on public available climate and also environment and remote sensing data to provide large-scale descriptive analysis. And you find out that in this current study that I'm yet to start, we'll try to assess the knowledge, attitude, and practice of this refugee community living in Doughnut in the northeastern Kenya, and we will really focus on the vulnerable people. These are the women and children, and see how they're trying to cope up with this situation. Next slide, please. So when we talk about empowering women for planetary health, I've been honored to work with the Women Leaders for Planetary Health, which was initiated back in 2020. And we find out that I've also had an opportunity to work with the indigenous communities from the Lake Baringo and Bogoria here in Kenya, who are really affected by both drought and flooding. So there is a lot of cross-cutting issues related with the respiratory health. And you find out that this is caused through the air pollution, since a lot of these communities really use firewood and charcoal in their homesteads. So we were trying to also figure out how can we use the power of these movements like Women Leaders for Planetary Health. There is need also to just, through these initiatives, to implement policy frameworks and also universal health coverage, and also empower the women through education, mentorship programs, and also economic empowerment in order to improve women's health. And the factor is that we find that there is also equal opportunities in Central Point alongside the expansion of these care mechanisms. And we know that education is a key access to a point for gender equality. So in general, I would like to say that a shift in the perception of gender roles is needed to improve women's health in the context of climate change. And women also have the legal access to economic decisions and equal rights in career choice, and selections of applicants contribute to this. Next slide, please. So why does presentation matter? So through the Women Leader for Planetary Health, which offers a platform to elevate the voices of vulnerable women from the Global South, Africa being one of the Global South continent, affected with also the natural disasters due to climate change. You see that women have different experiences, barriers, and challenges related to social norms. And we see that this can be translated into different policy preferences between men and women, and also female participations in the decision-making can change priorities. And also communities can do better in resilience and capacity building strategies when women are involved. So through this, working closely with these communities, they have tried as much as possible to come up with adaptation measures on how they can tackle the climate health issues that they are faced. Next slide, please. I would briefly like to introduce to you our ongoing SOPHIA project that is strengthening One Health and planetary health in Eastern Africa. This is in partnership with the University of Würzburg and also Catholic University of Health and Allied Sciences in Tanzania, and also my university, School of Environmental Sciences, University of Eldoret, Kenya. This was to strengthen the ongoing activities that we've done under the Planetary Health Eastern Africa Hub. So the SOPHIA project really brings together international and regional expertise to strengthen education, research, and academic collaboration and scientific exchange on planetary health. So we really look at these 4 categories. We look on the issues of education, research, community engagement, and also student exchange. So we work closely with the campus ambassadors across the African side to contribute in this initiative. And also we really strengthen more of research collaboration. We bring together research initiatives and organizations as well as universities together so that they can collaborate and tackle issues to do with the climate change and environmental changes. And among those, also working closely with these communities, we have worked with a number of local-led grassroots communities that are really prioritizing women's health. Next slide, please. Also, at the moment, we've also focusing also on another project called PHONIC, Public Health Operations for Climate Action. We are trying to develop a framework to identify priority operations. And in this, as you can see, we've realized that there is no framework available to assist decision makers in determining the most relevant public health functions for climate action. And we find out that we are trying to analyze and also map the available evidence and also develop a practical guidance for the decision makers. Now we will also put women to the top priorities for climate change in the context of public health operations. So we consider various disciplines and also global perspectives and also the vulnerabilities of different groups, especially women and children, and also put the findings into practice. So through this, we are trying to do a piloting between Germany and Kenya to collaborate in this project. The next slide, please. In conclusion, I would like to say we've written a number of papers. As you can see, displayed in the screen. The first one we wrote with the Women Leaders for Planetary Health, and we realized that there is true recovery and transition for a more resilient global society can be achieved by adopting an approach based on planetary health with a core focus on reducing social inequalities. And this will therefore need to build a healthy future for people on the planet, and we need to redesign existing decision-making structures to ensure that representation of communities they serve are available, especially for the women. Next slide, please. I would like just to say thank you so much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to interacting further. Thank you.
Thank you, Melvine Otieno, for these important insights. So let us look together at the takeaways, questions, and comments we would like to discuss with Professor Kandlehart and Melvine Otieno. I now hand over it to Julie for opening our breakout rooms.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you, Dr. Kandlehart and Melvine, for your exceptional presentations. They were so compelling. Really appreciate it. We are going to go into breakout rooms. So bear with me for a second while I get you in breakout rooms and talk about your most compelling takeaway and what you'd like to know more about. Welcome back, everyone. We're waiting for a few people still to come back while I share my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone is back. Thank you so much. I hope you had some very rich conversation, and we want to hear the results of that and hear what you had to say. So I am going to randomly ask for feedback, and we'll start with Eric.
Thanks so much. Well, I had 4 participants from Switzerland, Sweden, New York City, and Canada. And we summarized basically that it was always felt that it is the developing countries which were more affected by climate change. But even these 4 countries have gone through a major catastrophe in many ways. So this is a matter of concern. And all the ones who were there on the chat did mention, were concerned, especially the impact this climate change would have on women. And drastic steps need to be taken to put these under control, because now there is no developing or developed countries. Each and every country in the world, whether you're good in economic or bad in economic, that's not the concern. Each and every country in the world is being affected by climate change, especially women. And changes need to be made, legislations need to be made so that women find a better way for them to sustain themselves in these dire situations.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate your comments from your breakout room. Let's move on to Karen. What did you hear in your breakout room? Karen, I don't know if you're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go. Now, yeah, thank you. I couldn't unmute myself. Oh, it was such a very interesting conversation I had with people from New Zealand, Germany, and Bangladesh. And it goes to that what Eric also stated, that we saw from Professor Kandlehart and from Melvine Otieno that this is not a topic far away from Europe, far away from Germany, for instance. And that, of course, helps us to advocate for our issues, yeah. And there was a very, also Dilruba from Bangladesh, she pointed that yes, of course, in Germany, we got different health systems, and it's a little bit, it's more accessible than in Bangladesh. But these things have to be spread around, all those findings. They're so important to spread around, to educate on. So one of the very interesting questions came from New Zealand, from Claudine Bock. She asked how to give all those findings sufficient traction so that we see a change, a turnaround in politics globally, and that we can improve healthy lives for all of the people in the world. And that was a very interesting question. I would love to ask that again to Professor Kandlehart and then to Melvine Otieno. Events like, yeah, so, okay, on that, yeah, we talked about COP, for instance. Yeah, is this discussed on COP? And this was very interesting. Okay.
Thank you, Karen. Now to Pia, what did you learn in your room?
Thank you. Yeah, we were a nice group from the Philippines, Kenya, Germany, and Germany, and also Sweden. Then we were fascinated, or we were eye-opened by the effect climate change has on the pregnancy, and we need to spread this. It's important that this research is spread around the world. And also Janine from Germany, she would like to ask our presentations, our professor maybe, or Melvine, about what effect flooding and big snow amounts that you have experienced in Germany have, if there is any research of specific effects on women. And then we also talk about the fishing communities. Mita it's all over. It's not only in Kenya, and it's also in India and Bangladesh, I suppose, where women are responsible for the fishing, and they need to go early in the morning and get the food. And in Kenya, India, she also mentioned that sometimes even the women need to offer sex because of this, the problem to get the fish, and it's the final solution of offering sex, and that's just need to be lifted and need to be we need to get rid of those things. And also Molin del Rosario from the Philippines talked about when there are typhoons and we have floodings, they need more shelters and more health products, and it need to be more organized in those countries that are really affected of the really bad floodings. So concluding also that we need more women in decision-making positions. That's a big conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pia. Appreciate that. And Bobby, what did you learn in your room?
I learned we didn't have enough time for all the questions and discussions. But we started, let's see, we had...
Bobby, you just muted. I don't know how.
I'm sorry, I
okay.
did that with my paper, I guess. We had participants from Australia, Philippines, Bangladesh, the US, and we were fortunate to have Melvine from Kenya as well. So we started by talking about, my takeaway was that premature birth rate increasing, being really worrisome, because I mentioned in my own case, my son was born prematurely and we had to worry about asthma because his lungs hadn't developed enough. So that became a lifelong result of premature birth. And then Bev from Australia was talking about the premature births are probably even worse close to the equator. And we asked Melvine, since she was in our group, how is education going, particularly in the rural areas of Kenya for the women? And she was very encouraging, saying that it is changing. Women, particularly indigenous women, like the Maasai, are becoming more educated and feel like they have to focus on education in order to have more opportunities to combat the problems of climate change. And that this has all changed in the last 5 to 10 years. So that was encouraging news. We also asked about birth control and family size, and we're told that that is also something that is beginning to change because of awareness of, of having to move whole families when a flooding situation comes along, that it's so much more difficult with a larger family. Mafusa from Bangladesh was talking about the heavy monsoon, then the landslides, and the fact that even pregnant women were caught in the landslide and killed. And that, this is a terrible situation we have to, concern ourselves with right now. And Marie from the Philippines.
Bobby, you muted again. I'm sorry.
Boy, I don't know how I'm doing that. Anyway, that the Zonta Club of Manila is engaged in a project that has to do with tree planting, but also education of the community. And that she was in the midst of telling us more when we had to end our discussion. So hopefully we'll continue that going forward.
Thank you, Bobby. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who participated in the discussion. We had a rich discussion talking about floods and excess snow and fishing and asthma and premature birth. And what my takeaway is that we're all very, very concerned. And we're all part of this, connecting together to try to make a difference. I'm going to throw it over to Bobby for our next slide.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion about pressing issues that we all face. Climate change poses a major risk, a major threat to women's health for many man-made reasons. Renowned scientists around the world have already looked at how to deal with them. So, are you ready for the big picture? You might be surprised at what they suggest and how much is already being done. Please don't forget to put your questions and remarks in the chat for our next breakout session and final discussion.
And it's really very important to show that the implementation of the 17 goals, SDGs of the 2030 agenda signed by the 193 member states of the United Nations is crucial, to get along with the planetary emergency that we are discussing today. And of course, this framework is perhaps the most comprehensive to measuring what matters for the well-being of all future generations. The 17 goals, as you may know, are interlinked and consist of 169 targets with 2048 indicators. Many of these are related, of course, to SDG number 5 on gender equality, and this also applies to SDG 3, good health and well-being. This goal includes targets 3.1, reduce maternal mortality, and 3.7, ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health care, and planning and education. So the sad truth is that as the Secretary General report published in May 2024 already noted for this year's SDG report, little has changed in the last 12 months since the alarming findings of the last SDG report in June 2023. Only 15% of the SDG targets are on track to be met. Minimal or moderate progress has been made on almost half of the targets, and progress has stalled or even declined on more than a third of the targets. So what's the problem here? What do scientists recommend? How can we accelerate the process of implementing the SDGs? As discussed, climate change posed numerous threats to women's health, exacerbated by women's poverty. Are we trying to work within a broken economic system? SDG 8 aims to achieve sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, as well as full and productive employment and decent work for all. Goals that are closely linked to goal number 3, as our wonderful keynote speakers showed us. Kate Raworth, a British economist from the University of Oxford, pointed out that our economic understanding is still based on the narrative of continuous growth, derived from theories of the 17th and 18th centuries and further developed in the 1920s and 1970s. Gross domestic product, developed in the United States in the 1920s to track the country's economic development after the Great Depression, remains the primary indicator of economic growth, but fails to consider income distribution, environmental quality, and human well-being. So is gross domestic product suitable for addressing 21st century challenges and achieving the SDGs? Any alternative to endless growth? In search of practical answers, Kate Raworth looked at what it would take to achieve prosperity for all while stopping the exploitation and destruction of our planet. In this short video, she introduces the Doughnut Economy.
So a few years ago, I tried to draw a picture because I love drawing pictures. I tried to draw a picture of the world that we want to live in. And it, silly though it sounds, it came out looking like a donut, American one with a hole in the middle. So imagine a donut, there's the outside and then there's the inside and there's that hole in the middle. In the hole in the middle, that's a space of deprivation, a space of shortfall where people don't have the resources to meet the essentials of life, like they don't have enough food or education, they don't have access to electricity, enough income, they don't have decent housing. So it's a space of shortfall and we want to get people out of that hole in the middle into the donut. But we want to do that for the whole world, making sure that we also don't go beyond the donut's outer crust, because that's a space of ecological overshoot where humanity puts more pressure on the planet than the planet can take, and we start causing climate change or massive loss of biodiversity. We start creating a hole in the ozone layer or polluting Earth with chemicals that we add to it. So we need to both get people out of deprivation and poverty, but also protect Earth and protect these fundamental life-supporting systems that keep us alive. Those are the two sides of human well-being, the inside and the outside of the donut. And the 21st century challenge is a unique one. It's to get everybody out of poverty while coming back in at the same time. That's never been taken on before. And that's partly why we need to rewrite economics, because it's a completely new way of looking at what human well-being is.
Yes, and that's really exciting. I think based on country data from 1992 to 2015, the University of Leeds in England used the Doughnut model to analyze how countries around the world have fared. And for example, like many countries of the global south, Kenya's environmental footprint is small, as it has no red exceeding the outer circle of the donut with its 9 planetary boundaries. However, it's not socially just, as there is a lot of red in the donut hole. Like many countries in the global north, Germany is overshooting the ecological ceiling, but is meeting the needs of its population on most social parameters. However, many of the remaining problems of gender equality, social justice, and health are growing. Our discussion today reflected on some of the key issues of the inner circle of Doughnut economics, and the green rings indicate the healthy life expectancy offered by each country. What a huge difference in between those both countries. Is this fair?
The Club of Rome is a renowned nonprofit organization of diverse thought leaders from around the world. And it's asking us these following questions. Can we join forces to overcome the challenges of this century together? Can we make a collective leap forward in human development? Can we overcome divisions, neocolonial and financial exploitation, historical injustices, and deep mistrust between nations to solve the emergency in the long term? And finally, can we achieve systematic change in decades, not centuries? The Club of Rome puts the answers to all these questions in the book Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity. This is also part of Kate Rayworth's work, and you can learn more about it if you go online and Google Earth for All. I highly suggest that you do that. Kate Rayworth is a member of the Club of Rome, and she's one of the great thinkers working on advanced thought processes to improve our global scenario right now. Okay, I'm handing this over to Bobby.
Are you muted?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Julie. The concept of shifting from growth to balanced prosperity is gaining traction globally, with initiatives such as DEAL, which is the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, Kate Rayworth, Earth for All, the Club of Rome, and the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, or We All, set up by Oxfam, the New Economics Foundation, and Shoemaker College. These initiatives are working together and complementing each other. Cities such as Amsterdam and Melbourne are implementing the donut model, with Melbourne adding mobility, arts, culture, and a focus on healing and reconnection. Countries such as Barbados and Costa Rica, Scotland, Iceland, and Wales are adapting these principles through the donut and well-being economies. And local We All hubs exist in Brazil, East Africa, South Africa, and Sweden. Sweden and Norway are working with Earth for All on systemic global change. What impact could this have on global and planetary health, especially on the health of women? Well, let's discuss this. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Bobby. Here are some of the, excuse me, here are some of the questions we have. How do, in relation to women's health, and how do these solutions resonate with me? And we've just connected the dots between our foundational economies and how they're not gender equal and contribute to poor health for women and children. So what do you want to know? We're going to go into breakout rooms for just a few minutes because of time. I'm going to stop the share, and then we will be back in a few minutes after I start the breakout rooms again. And I believe it'll go to the exact same ones. So have fun chatting for a few minutes. Thank you all for coming back, for those of you who are here. And we had a bit of a speed discussion. I know it was quick. So we're going to have a speed highlight, and that's going to be quick too. So let's start with Bobby this time.
Okay, well, yes, we did need a speed discussion, but it sounds like if people are like me, and it sounds like many of us were, because we had representatives from Sweden and Australia and Philippines and Kenya and Bangladesh and Germany. It sounds like many were like me, that the donut economic model is new to us. So we have to educate ourselves. We have to educate our clubs, maybe do one big event to try to educate our members just about the whole concept, and then maybe go and educate the public.
Thank you, Bobby. That was wonderful. And it sounds like we're all on the same page. We need to learn more. Pia, you're next.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had a question before to our speakers about if there is any research about floodings or big snow events that affects women more. And our sort of conclusion or thing we would like to bring up for action is maybe that we in Zonta could try to influence the decision makers that after big weather events, extreme events, there should be at least 30% women in the local communities that do make the decisions after the big catastrophes, to make sure the women get what they need, sort of. So that's our conclusion.
Thank you. That's so incredibly important. Karen, what did you learn?
Yeah, well, I think it's the same in our group, and I like also to turn it then to Eva Kandlehart and Melvine Otieno, that we, on the first hand, we have to spread the news and talk about it intercontinentally, of course, that we have to really connect with other NGOs on that topics, also men's NGOs like Rotary. That was something which came from the Aruba. So that we really have to raise our voices on that and to help people to know about those facts. That's the one thing. And the other is, of course, yes, take a closer look to those recommendations of the Club of Rome and discuss them as well intercontinentally. That's very important. And look how they are be taken in by decision makers, of course, and yeah, what we can do about them ourselves. That was something I think I can summarize this way.
Thank you, Karen. And
So-
Eric, what did you learn?
I just had two participants. The others they couldn't join in or they left. Well, a very good thing that came up was Zonta Club of Ottawa. They have started something called the Climate Justice Committee. They have formed this committee where they share their stories and feelings. Also, they further said, Renuka further mentioned, that media does not cover women's health. Even
Right.
Leslie from Sweden, she said media doesn't cover much, and the media should basically give due importance to women's health, and this is a major deficit in these countries. Also, she further laid emphasis that things are very discouraging. One should look inside out. The main emphasis is one should look inside out, and that's what just two of them shared. That's it. I don't know about the rest, but I just had two participants in my group.
Well, it sounds like a rich discussion, even with a smaller group, Eric. Thank you so very much. And thank you to everyone who participated, to our Dr. Kandlehart and Melvine. We're going to continue with our presentation today. We are running a few minutes late, so if you can hang in there, we have a few more slides. Let me share my screen. So thank you for contributing to this wonderful discussion. As we close our session today, we're going to summarize, and I'm going to send it over to Pia.
Oh, here we have the train. We started the train journey and described why Zonta International is committed to gender equitable climate action through Zonta Says Now. We also showed how climate change affects the health of women and girls. The powerful keynote speeches by Professor Eva Kandlehart and Melvine Otieno and the discussion with both experts have gave us a deep insight into the link between the climate change and women's health. Their respective commitments show us how deeply concerned they and their colleagues are, how important it is to listen to the science and to strengthen the cooperation of civil society in between Global North and Global South. We then looked at the state of implementation of the SDGs and asked how this can be accelerated, including measures to ensure humans' right to health. We asked several thought leaders for promising solutions to the challenges of the 21st century and learned about Doughnut economies and Earth for All. This book applies the Doughnut economy and shows 5 turnarounds in its giant leap scenario to create a thriving, balanced planet. We also learned that these models are already being applied in several countries, cities, communities around the world. Finally, in the context of today's theme, we discussed how these solutions resonate with us in Zonta and what actions we can take, including working with our local communities and like-minded NGOs around the world. What a journey! Your ideas and feedback today will help us develop our activities and resources to create a better world for women and girls. I will now hand over to Karin to tell you more, or Julie maybe, about our new campaign and tools and resources.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you, everyone. Just a quick run through, you can find the statement on climate change from 2022 on Zonta International website, calls on governments to do these 3 steps, as well as enable women's fully participation in the economy. And we talked a lot about this today, enable women to be part of the decision-making for planning on disaster preparedness. And we also call on our Zonta members to do these 5 bullets: increase awareness, include gendered climate change advocacy actions, support women's inclusion, promote girls' education, climate literacy, and women in STEM, and advocate for national policies that build a better world for women and girls. Those are key items for Zonta Says Now. We have tools. We have a website. We highly recommend you go to our website. Today you are participating in a think tank, but we have them every month in different areas around the world. So participate when you can. And look at our framework for action. These are 5 steps to get more comfortable with advocating. And of course, the virtual art gallery that we are opening for new submissions for the 2025 season, and then submission period opens July 1st. That's all found on the website, zonta.org. Also, you can find these resources, a lot of leaflets. You can print them or you can share them on your screen when you are in your club meetings or your district meetings. And Bobby's going to close us out. Bobby?
Okay, thanks, Julie. Yes, I am unmuted. Today we learned about the basic ideas of a fairer economic system that ensures patient-centered healthcare and medical research and meets the diverse needs of everyone. Such a system could create climate justice for women like Deborah and Ion, Judith, Claire, Maria, Belia, and Freya. I'd like to thank our wonderful keynote speakers and today's presenters and all of you for participating in today's session. We hope we've challenged your thinking. I know you did mine, and inspired you to create an Earth for all. If you'd like to find out more about Zonta or would like to get in contact, please visit our website or email us at the address on the screen. And before we close, I'm going to hand you over to Julie for a mutual goodbye.
Wow, what a great session. And I'm sorry it went a little late.